Hey everyone. Have you ever noticed how some fighters lose before the fight even starts? Not because they are scared, not because they are weak, but because by the time they enter the cage, the fight has already changed them. The trash talk got too personal, the matchup created too much doubt. The moment became too heavy. The aura of the opponent started controlling their decisions before a single punch was thrown. And once that happens, everything looks different. A patient champion rushes. A pressure fighter hesitates, a striker stops throwing, a wrestler stops shooting. The fighter is still there, the skills are still there, but the version that made them dangerous never fully shows up. We have seen it with Jose Aldo against Conor McGregor. We saw it with Ronda Rousey against Holly Holm. We saw it with Paulo Costa against Israel Adesanya. And we saw it with Cyril Gane against John Jones. Different fighters, different styles, different moments, but the same uncomfortable truth. In MMA, the referee may start the fight, but sometimes the damage starts long before that. And if you understand how that happens, you start seeing fights differently. Because some fighters do not lose when they get knocked out, submitted, or dominated. They lose the moment the fight makes them someone else. Now let's get to the juicy part. So, why some fighters lose before the fight starts? In MMA, a fight does not begin when the referee says go. It begins weeks before that, sometimes months before that. It begins in the build-up, in the press conference, in the matchup, in the fear of one weapon, in the pressure of protecting an image, and in the quiet doubt that starts growing before the cage door even closes. Losing before the fight starts does not mean a fighter is scared in a simple way. These are professional fighters. They are not cowards. It means the conditions around the fight have already changed how they behave. Their emotions are different, their decisions are different, their patience is different, their normal rhythm is harder to find, and in a sport where tiny reactions matter, that can be enough. Sean Strickland against Khamzat Chimaev is a more recent example of the same idea. Chimaev came in with one of the strongest auras in the sport, undefeated, physically overwhelming, and built around the feeling that once he got his hands on someone, the fight would stop being competitive. But against Strickland, the build-up became messy. The trash talk was constant, personal, and uncomfortable. Strickland did what he usually does. He dragged the fight into a mental space before it ever reached the cage. And whether Chimaev was truly affected by it or not, he did not look like the same force people expected. The fight went 5 rounds, and Strickland won a narrow split decision. That matters because even though the scorecards were close, the aura changed. You even have important figures in MMA like Jorge Masvidal and Dustin Poirier talking about it in their podcast.
Whoever he gets matched up with, it's gonna be tough for him to intimidate because his aura took a hit this week.
For sure. Oh man.
Especially the every round dapping it up like we're besties.
And putting the belt on him, like, come on, man.
Chimaev was no longer the untouched problem that nobody could solve. He had been forced into a long, ugly, uncomfortable fight, the kind of fight where Strickland thrives. This is another way fighters can lose before the fight starts. Not always by panicking, not always by being scared. Sometimes they lose because the build-up pulls them away from the cleanest version of themselves. There was also some reports of Khamzat having trouble in the weight-ins. Armand Sarikian, his close mate, said that he cuts up to 21 kilograms or 46 pounds just in fight week, which I think is an absurd, and if true, was probably the reason of why he looked so gassed out after that takedown in the second round. That also counts as a factor in why you already lost before even the fight starts. Chimaev's greatest weapon was supposed to be certainty, forward pressure, takedowns, physical dominance. But when the fight became emotional, when the weight cut and pressure were part of the story, and when Strickland refused to act impressed, that certainty started to look less stable. That does not mean Strickland won only with trash talk. He still had to fight, he still had to defend, survive, and keep the fight in the kind of rhythm where Chimaev became less overwhelming. But the mental battle helped shape the conditions. It made the fight feel less like Chimaev imposing his world and more like Strickland dragging him into chaos, discomfort, and frustration. And that is the danger of aura. When a fighter's image is built on being unstoppable, even looking human can feel like a loss. Chimaev did not just lose a decision, he lost the feeling that his fights were inevitable. And once that aura breaks, opponents do not see you the same way again. A fighter can lose before the fight starts when they believe too strongly in the version of themselves that has always worked. That belief is powerful when everything goes right. It creates confidence, it creates commitment. But when the opponent is prepared for that exact identity, confidence can become stubbornness. Rousey did not need to be a bad fighter to lose that night. She only needed to be forced into a fight where her usual certainty stopped working. Paulo Costa against Israel Adesanya is another example. Costa entered UFC 253 unbeaten, and the fight was sold as a dangerous pressure fighter against a precise champion. But Adesanya stopped him by second-round TKO at 3 minutes and 59 seconds. What stood out was not just that Costa lost, it was that he never really became the physical, pressuring version people expected. He looked stuck between wanting to attack and not wanting to walk into traps. That is what elite counter-strikers can do before the fight even starts. They make opponents feel like every entry is dangerous. Costa's usual strength was pressure, physicality, and intimidation. But against Adesanya, that pressure came with a cost. Every step forward risked being read, every big attack risked being countered. So Costa hesitated, and once a pressure fighter hesitates, the whole style begins to break down. This is not always about fear, sometimes it is about uncertainty. A fighter can be brave and still unsure. They can be willing to fight but not sure which version of the fight is safe. That uncertainty creates delay, and delay is deadly. The fighter starts waiting for a perfect opening that never comes. Meanwhile, the opponent gets more comfortable, collects reads, and takes control. Cyril Gane against Jon Jones showed another type of early loss. Jones submitted Gane with a guillotine choke at 2 minutes and 4 seconds of the first round at UFC 285. On paper, Gane was an elite heavyweight striker with the movement, size, and athleticism. But the question before the fight was obvious. What happens when Jon Jones gets close, wrestles, and forces him into grappling situations? That question was answered almost immediately. Sometimes fighters lose before the fight starts because the matchup already puts them in a psychological box. Gane did not have to be broken emotionally. The problem was that the fight carried one huge threat, and that threat shaped everything. When a fighter knows one phase of the fight is much more dangerous than the others, they can become tense before the first real exchange. They are not just fighting the opponent, they are fighting the idea of where the fight might go. That is what makes bad matchups so powerful. They do not only create technical problems, they create mental pressure. A striker who fears the takedown may strike less freely. A wrestler who fears the counter may shoot less confidently. A pressure fighter who fears the clinch may stop pressuring. The threat changes the fighter before the opponent even fully uses it. And in MMA, that is enough, because the sport is too fast and too unforgiving for a fighter to be slightly outside themselves. One emotional entry can end a decade-long reign. One moment of hesitation can freeze a pressure fighter. One fear of the takedown can take away a striker's weapons. One bad mental state can make an elite fighter look ordinary. That is why the fight before the fight matters. Not because mindset replaces skill, but because mindset decides how much of that skill shows up. The best version of a fighter is not just the version with the best technique, it is the version that can stay calm enough to use it, and that is the real point. Fighters do not always lose before the fight starts because they are afraid. Sometimes they lose because the fight has already changed them. Their rhythm is gone, their patience is gone, their confidence is too loud, or their doubt is too quiet. And by the time the cage door closes, the first mistake is already waiting to happen. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. It will help me out a lot and be highly appreciated. Peace.